And I'd like to do a little history. I promise to be brief, but in 2009, I believe that's the correct year, we set up a cemetery working group of the Parks and Rec Board because it had come to our attention that the Perpetual Fund was the source of funding for all cemetery operations.
That's not correct. The Perpetual Fund was not the source of income. It is kind of like an endowment or perpetual care fund. In 2009, Intercare Corporation was still operating the cemeteries. Intercare Corporation's contract, basically, the way it was set up is that Intercare handled all of the income of the cash coming in, and then they had a specific fee for doing the maintenance and the office work throughout the year. Now, again, we don't know how many people are going to die each year, but at the end of the year, there were some years that they had to write the city a check, and there were some years that the city actually wrote the contractor a check. And over the long run, it was the day-to-day maintenance was in the black. It wasn't in the red. It was not the Perpetual Care Fund. The city started tapping in to Perpetual Care Fund when they started having to look at tree maintenance and some of the other things that were outside of the realm of the contract.
The Perpetual Fund was believed to be perpetual, self-refunding, and it was running out of money. So,
and again, Perpetual Care Funds, endowment care funds are set up that for every grave space you sell, that you put money aside with the thought that if you get 1,000 burials per acre, by the time you sell out that acre, or by the time you sell out your park, your memorial park, and you have nothing left to sell, then the monies in that Perpetual Care Fund, the principal, would have gained enough interest over time and gotten bigger and bigger that the interest off of that principal would be able to sustain the park in the future. The problem is that the city of Austin has raided this fund for other things over the many years.
How were cemetery operations going to be paid for? And so our working group met with a number of stakeholders, the city staff, the contractor, people who were very concerned about various of the 5 cemetery plots. And we managed to come up with a recommendation that went to city council, and city council realized, oops, this needs to be a general fund item. It needs to be something that is considered in the park's budget every year.
And that's how we got to the point where the taxpayers are now spending $2.2 million a year to fund the cemetery operation. And again, it's above and beyond that, because what you don't see is all of the supporting divisions within the Parks Department or within the city that actually backcharge the Parks Department for things. Here's a point, is that I just did an open records request asking for any reports over the last 3 years from our cemetery manager that she had sent up to the director or the city council or anybody else in the city, giving us a financial outlook on what we're spending, how many grave sites we've sold, how many interments we've done. And the response was, we have nothing. So for the last 3 years, we've not generated any reports that help us understand this at all. But yet when the contractor had this, reports were required quarterly, semi-annually, and annually, so we could gauge what's going on.
And so that was the start. And when you think that that's less than 10 years ago, I'm just wanting to set that background so that my fellow board members on the Parks Board understand it's come a long way in that time period, and to the point that we actually now have cemetery staff, which we didn't have. We had somebody who was not even an expert on that task with cemeteries along with everything else.
That is so false. And I've worked with this woman many times, and I have to tell her here at this format that in 2009, when the time frame she's talking about, Intercare had this. And Intercare Corporation works for the city of San Marcos, the city of New Braunfels. They had a staff. They had a staff at the office. They had staff that were mowing the grounds. They were very responsive. I find this continual beating up of the Intercare Corporation unacceptable. And again, I don't think it was intentional, but we had a staff. Now we have city staff. We had city employees, contract managers before, but the reality is they didn't care, and the department head didn't care because as long as it wasn't costing them money, they didn't care. They didn't have to fight for critical dollars in the Parks Division. The cemetery was this standalone stepchild.
So I'm personally very proud of where we've come, although I recognize there's still a long way to go.
And as a reminder, board member, we are moving towards, as we mentioned, and as we told council, that we will go in-house to interments. And so we'll be
Yes.
working closely with the transition. This year we have purchased, we have a budget to purchase equipment and staff. And so be advised that we are going to make good on what we've informed council on. And so it will yet be another step forward in the direction for full integration implementation for the cemetery division.
Here it is. We can't even cut the grass on a regular basis. And as bad of an idea as this is, and don't get me wrong, we've got some good people that work there, this is a terrible plan. Many of us who have been looking at this in the long run are just shaking our heads, and it's like watching a train wreck getting ready to happen. We know it's going to happen. And unfortunately, I'm going to stand back and wait, and then I'm going to say, I told you so.